Hello, and welcome to Budget Commander. On this channel, we'll discuss Magic the Gathering topics with a focus on playing Commander on a budget. We'll cover things like deck building, top cards, deck techs, and more. Let's get started. Hey friends, today we have a Commander gameplay for you. This is episode 1 of season 1 of Commander Shootout. Today our matchup is Anje Falkenrath versus Ghired Conclave Exile. Anje is a 3 to cast 1/3 with haste that can tap to discard a card to draw a card, and if she discards a Madness card, you get to untap her. So her deck is focused around the Madness mechanic, trying to get as much value out of her cards as she can. And she's against Ghired, who is playing a populate deck. He's a 5 to cast 2/5, and when he enters the battlefield or attacks, when he enters the battlefield, he creates a 4/4 Rhino Trampler, and then if he attacks, you get to populate, meaning he can make more Rhino tokens, or if he has better targets, he can make an even bigger creature token off of that populate trigger. Ghired's going to start us off by playing Greypelt Refuge, a land that enters the battlefield tapped, gains him a life, and can tap for green-white. He's going to pass the turn to Anje, who plays Command Tower and can tap for any color. She'll pass back to Ghired, who plays Nephalia Academy, a land that produces colorless, but also protects him from any of those discard strategies. And then he'll pay 2 for a Talisman of Unity, an artifact that you can tap to add a colorless, or you can tap it to add green-white, which will deal 1 damage to you. Ghired then passes to Anje, who plays a Swamp for turn, and passes back to Ghired. Ghired then plays a Rock Egg, a 0/3 defender, and when the Rock Egg dies, Ghired will get to create a 3/3 bird creature token with flying. He'll pass back to Anje, who will play a Swamp, and then she will bring herself out onto the battlefield, passing the turn back to Ghired, who plays a Plains, and passes back to Anje, who then casts Mire and Misery, forcing Ghired to sacrifice his Rock Egg, which will give him the trigger to create a 3/3 bird. Seems bad until Anje then discards to Madness Fiery Temper, dealing 3 damage to said bird and taking it out. She'll then play a Rakdos Carnarium, which enters the battlefield tapped, is going to bounce one of her swamps to her hand, but can tap for 2 colors in 1 tap, so that'll give her black-red. She'll then move to combat, attack Ghired for 1, bringing his life total back down to 40, passing the turn, and then we'll see Ghired play a Gruul Turf, his own bounce land, but this one gives him red-green. Returns the plains to hand, and passes it back to Anje, who plays Dark Ritual, adding 3 black mana to her mana pool, and then casts Read the Bones, which will allow her to scry 2 and draw 2 cards at the cost of 2 life. So she'll go down to 38, and then she'll play a Swamp for turn, and pass the turn to Ghired, who plays a Plains for turn, and then pays 5 for a Gahiji Honored One, a 4/4, that says whenever a creature attacks one of your opponents or a planeswalker an opponent controls, that creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So Ghired's attacking creatures get +2/+0. And then at the end of Ghired's turn, Anje discards to Madness the Voldaren Pariah, which is a 3/3 flyer that says, or has the activated ability, sacrifice 3 other creatures, and you can transform Voldaren Pariah into a 6/5 with flying. And then Anje's going to untap and discard to Madness Anje's Ravager. And so Anje will draw some cards off of that. She'll then play Bloodfell Caves, which enters tapped, gains her a life, and can tap for a black or a red. And move to combat, attacking Ghired with the Voldaren Pariah. bringing his life total down to 37. And then we'll see Ghired play a Temple of the False God, which taps for 2 colorless, and then he'll tap all of his lands to play Amara Tandris, a 5/7 that prevents all damage that would be dealt to creature tokens he controls. Pretty good for a token deck. Moving to combat, Ghired attacks Anje for 6 as he triggers himself, making him a 6/4. Bringing Anje down to 33. At the end of Ghired's turn, Anje will cycle the Blasted Landscape and then activate herself to discard a card to draw a card. And then on Anje's turn, she'll discard to Madness the Stormkirk Occultist, drawing some more cards. Cast Hate Mirage, targeting Amara Tandris and Gahiji Honored One. And then with her new tokens, she'll activate her Voldaren Pariah, sacrificing 3 other creatures, the Ravager and her 2 new friends, and transform the Pariah into the Abolisher of Bloodlines, a 6/5 flyer. And when this creature transforms into the Abolisher of Bloodlines, target opponent, Gahiji, sacrifices 3 creatures. So Gahiji and Amara Tandris will leave the battlefield, and then Anje will go to combat and swing herself and the Abolisher of Bloodlines at Ghired, bringing his life total down to 30. Second main, she'll play a Mountain and pass the turn. Ghired's going to then cast his own Hate Mirage, copying the Abolisher of Bloodlines and the Stormkirk Occultist, and then cast a second Harvest, giving him a token copy of his already token creatures. So he'll have 2 Abolishers and 2 Occultists. Then Ghired's going to move to combat and attack his Mirage creatures at Anje, bringing her life total down to 24. And then play a Selesnya Guildgate, which enters tapped and can add a green-white. At the end of turn, Ghired's creatures, his Mirage creatures, are going to get exiled. And then Anje untaps and plays a Swamp. Discards to Madness the Bloodhall Priest, which is a 4/4. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, if you have no cards in hand, Bloodhall Priest deals 2 damage to any target. She does have cards in her hand, so it doesn't matter in this particular instance. Anje will then play the Armillary Sphere, which can be sacrificed to fetch some lands to her hand. Then move to combat, attacking with the Occultist and the Abolisher. Ghired's gonna block the Occultist with his own Occultist. They will kill each other, but the trample damage will bring Ghired down to 28. And then Ghired blocks the Abolisher with his own Abolisher, and they will destroy each other. And then second main phase, Anje's gonna play a Star Compass, which enters the battlefield tapped and can add 1 mana of any color to her mana pool. And then pass the turn to Ghired, who plays a Forest, and then casts a Giant Ataphage, a 7/7 Trampler, and whenever the Giant Ataphage deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of Giant Ataphage. And then he's going to pass, but before the end of turn, Anje's going to cycle a Baron Moor, and then she will tap to discard a card to draw a card. After untapping, Anje's going to activate her Armillary Sphere, sacrificing it to search up a couple of basics to her hand. And then she's going to play a Mountain for turn. And cast or discard to Madness the Gorgon Recluse, a 2/4 that reads, whenever Gorgon Recluse blocks or becomes blocked by a non-black creature, destroy that creature at the end of combat. So sort of a Death Touch type ability. Pretty common on Gorgons. And then Anje's going to discard to Madness the Blood Mad Vampire, a 4/1, and whenever the Blood Mad Vampire deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then she will pass the turn to Ghired. Ghired's going to go directly to combat and attack Anje for 7 with the Giant Ataphage. Anje's going to double block with the Gorgon Recluse and the Bloodhall Priest. Giant Ataphage will assign combat damage first to the Bloodhall Priest and second to the Gorgon Recluse, killing the Bloodhall Priest off. And then the Gorgon Recluse will take 3 combat damage, leaving it still alive, but her triggered ability will happen, destroying a non-black creature that she blocked. So the Giant Ataphage goes to the graveyard, as well as the Bloodhall Priest. Then second main, Ghired's going to cast Trostani's Summoner, a 1/1, but when it enters the battlefield, Ghired's going to create a 2/2 white knight with Vigilance, a 3/3 green Centaur, and a 4/4 green Rhino with Trample. Instant board state for 7 mana, seems good. And then at the end of turn, Anje is going to tap to draw a card, and then she's going to open up with a Swamp. And then she's going to cast the Boneyard Parlay, which reads, exile up to 5 target creature cards from graveyards. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put all cards from the pile of your choice onto the battlefield under your control, and the rest into their owner's graveyard. The 5 cards that Anje selects are Gahiji Honored One, Amara Tandris, Voldaren Pariah, Bloodhall Priest, and the Giant Ataphage. Ghired separates them into the left and right piles, and Anje decides to keep the pile on the right, Bloodhall Priest and Giant Ataphage. And then she's going to play a Burnished Heart, passing the turn to Ghired, who plays a Rogue's Passage. And then he casts a Soul of Zendikar, a 6/6 with Reach that can pay 5 mana to create 3/3 Beast tokens. You can also exile the Soul of Zendikar from the graveyard to create a 3/3 Beast token as well. Then Ghired's going to go to the end step, and Anje will discard a card to draw a card, and then she will cycle the Forgotten Cave and start her turn by untapping, playing a Temple of the False God, which taps for 2 mana as long as you control 5 or more lands. Cast a Meteor Golem targeting the Soul of Zendikar, so attempting to destroy it, which does resolve, and then moves to combat, attacking with everything but Anje and the Golem. Before blockers are declared, Ghired activates the Soul of Zendikar from the graveyard, creating a 3/3 Beast token. And then we see the Knight trade with the Blood Mad Vampire, the Rhino trade with the Gorgon Recluse. The Centaur attempts to block the Burnished Heart, but Anje will activate its ability, sacrificing it to put 2 basics onto the battlefield tapped before combat damage is dealt. And then we see the Bloodhall Priest and Giant Ataphage unblocked, bringing Ghired's life total down to 17 and giving the Giant Ataphage a trigger, creating a second Giant Ataphage. Then during the second main phase, Anje is going to cast Victimize, sacrificing the Meteor Golem to return Blood Mad Vampire and the Voldaren Pariah to the battlefield tapped. Oops, didn't have those tapped, but they're supposed to be on the battlefield tapped. Ghired starts his turn and casts himself, bringing a 4/4 Rhino friend with him. And then he passes the turn to Anje, who untaps, plays a mountain for a turn, goes to combat and swings with everything but herself. Ghired decides to trade the Centaur with a Blood Mad Vampire, and bounce block the Bloodhall Priest with himself, and double block the Giant Ataphage with a Beast and Rhino, killing off the non-token Ataphage. And then the token Ataphage and Voldaren Pariah get through, bringing Ghired's life total down to 7. Gets a trigger off of the token Ataphage, giving Anje a second Giant Ataphage, and then second main phase, Anje's going to discard to Madness Psychotic Haze, dealing 1 damage to each creature and each player. This is going to kill off the Summoner, as well as Ghired, as he took 4 damage from the Bloodhall Priest during combat. The board looks like that afterwards, and then she passes the turn to Ghired, who plays himself again from the command zone, bringing a friend with him, and then he casts Lifecrafter's Bestiary, which seems not impactful at this moment, and passes the turn. At the end, however, Anje's going to cast Death Denied, returning X creatures from her graveyard to her hand. And then she's going to discard to Madness the Blood Mad Vampire, and discard to Madness Anje's Ravager, and discard to Madness the Stormkirk Occultist. Now that she's tapped out, she'll have to start her own turn. Seems like a good end step, which she starts out by playing the Myriad Landscape and moving to combat, swinging everything but herself at Ghired, who very kindly concedes or chooses not to block and brings his life total down to 0. Victory goes to Anje. Highlights from Ghired's deck. Ghired himself, he got cast twice and brought some Rhino friends with him. He didn't get a swing and really get aggressive. I don't know if you noticed or not, but I believe turn 3 Ghired didn't miss a land drop, and as this is an aggressive deck, really need to get those land drops so that you can keep pressing your game plan. Giant Ataphage was an all-star, although he did more of an impact, or had more of an impact for Anje herself. Still, really powerful card, fun to see. Second Harvest was cool. Got 2 triggers off of Hate Mirage, so even though he had no board state, he ended up with 4 creatures in combat that turn and still had 2 after or into the next turn. Anje herself was a super highlight. She discarded a ton of cards and drew a bunch of cards off of her Madness ability, or even when it wasn't to Madness, was able to siphon her deck for the cards she needed. Boneyard Parlay helped her to get the Giant Ataphage, which really closed the game out. And then Voldaren Pariah was a solid play. This is much better in 1v1 situations, although both of these decks are really built for multiplayer. That sacrifice 3 other creatures and then target opponent sacrifices 3 creatures is really more of a 1v1 ability. After round 1, match 1, the standings are so. Anje's going to move on and Ghired's going to be knocked out. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Peace! Thanks for watching. You can help support this channel by hitting that subscribe button. This will help keep you up to date on content from Budget Commander. If you liked the video, make sure you like the video. Leave me a comment with your thoughts on this topic, and if you think someone else could benefit from this video, feel free to share. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk with you next time.